Welcome to the Lend Academy podcast, episode number 240. This is your host, Peter Renton, founder of Lend Academy and co-founder of the Lend It Fintech Conference. Today on the show, I am delighted to welcome David Reiling. He is the CEO and chairman at Sunrise Banks. Now, Sunrise Banks is a super interesting organization. They are a community bank, but they also are a mission-driven bank. And we get into some depth about what that actually means. You know, they do provide services to their local community. A lot of them are immigrant and low and middle income populations, but they have a different side of the bank where they are providing banking services to other fintechs. And we talk about that in some depth and talk about some of the fintechs they're working with today and what services they're offering. We also get into David's thoughts on the future of the community banking sector. He gives his thoughts on COVID-19 and more. It was a fascinating interview. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be with you today.
Likewise. So, I like to get these things started by giving the listeners a little bit of background. It looks like you've been in banking for most of your career. So why don't you just give us some of the highlights of your career to date?
Sure. It's funny because everybody looks at me from being a bank owner as being a banker. I'd characterize myself more as an entrepreneur.
Okay.
So my career started off really working construction every summer that I can imagine, except for one when I was a bank teller, and I loved being a bank teller. It was so much fun. As a matter of fact, the bank that I was in that summer got robbed twice, right to the left of me and right to the right of me. And I thought it was super exciting. And so
Right.
Between the money and the people and the robberies, I just thought this was really cool. So I go off to college. I ended up starting a business in college selling T-shirts and sweatshirts, and the business grew to be fairly good size. And after I graduated, sold that business. And since I loved being a banker, I went to work for a bank in Los Angeles called First Interstate Bank. Who knew, but my first 2 weeks on the job there, the bank that I was in got robbed 3 times. And so bank robberies seemed to be my destiny in terms of part of being a banker. And I thought, which was a normal course of business. So happened that the district manager thought I handled myself pretty well, sent me off to South Central Los Angeles, where I spent a number of years in South Central LA in the bank robbery capital of the world and learning how to navigate an urban core of diverse languages, drugs, gangs, Bloods and Crips, Rodney King and riots, fires, earthquakes. And so it was really an exciting time for me. But probably the turning point there was really the third time I had a gun to my head. I figured my luck wouldn't hold out. And so I moved banks to Citibank, had a great experience there, really got exposure to both the investment side as well as the international presence of banking, had a blast, was working my way towards New York City and corporate headquarters. My father called and let me know that there was a bank for sale. I moved back to St. Paul, Minnesota, where I grew up, bought a bank with my father, and began a turnaround situation of a bank that was really a train wreck and about to fail, and really with the focus in on the only way this bank was going to succeed is if the community succeeded. Just so happened at the time the Hmong from Laos, Southeast Asians, were the immigrants in the community at the time. And so we essentially created a Hmong bank, Hmong customers, Hmong staff. And we bet on them, they bet on us, and we grew nicely. My father had owned 2 other small banks at the time, and I eventually ended up taking over running those. I kind of merged 2 holding companies together and 3 bank charters. We bought another bank charter and bank branch along the way, and then kind of took off. But all around this context of really doing well by doing good in mission-driven type of a way. And that really kind of led us into the leveraging of technology.
Right. Okay. So maybe let's just talk about Sunrise Banks and how, like, when did you actually kind of launch that name, and was that sort of was that based on that one turnaround bank? Or just tell us a little bit about how the name and the brand came together.
Yeah, sure. So it really started in about 2004. I bought that bank with my father in 1995. Mm-hmm. So in 2004 is when I took over, and even though we had two bank holding companies and three separate bank charters at the time, we started to go by, like one bank was called University National Bank, the other was Franklin National Bank, and below the lines we'd say it was a Sunrise Community Bank. So we were trying to kind of link the three charters together, even though they kind of serve distinctly different neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get that halo effect, if you will. And in 2007 is when we really brought the two holding companies together, still three separate charters. And then we came up with the name of Sunrise. It was actually my father's name, if you will. He was living in Florida, and I was on my way to work, of which I drive east in the morning. I drive right into the sun. And so that's about as all the scientific as how we get to the name. Right. So the holding company became Sunrise Banks. We did business as that. And then eventually in 2013, we consolidated all the charters and changed the names of the banks officially to Sunrise Banks. It is plural based on our history, as well as the URL Sunrise Bank was already taken. And so we stuck with Sunrise Banks and cracked on.
Okay, so then you mentioned already that you're a mission-driven company, and maybe just share why that is and what is the mission.
Yeah. So overall, people really understand that the mission is to do well by doing good, and what that means from a standpoint is our mission is really at the forefront of what we do. It's not, if you think about it, it's not just an add-on. It's not just your mission plus, or margin plus a mission. And we certainly don't think of it as a detractor. We really think that our mission and engagement with not only our local communities, but with fintechs, if you will, that do good, that expansion of the mission expands the size of the bank, its earning potential, its business partners. And so it's really our mission multiplies our margin, and then our margin can reinvest in the mission. And so there's a synergistic effect in that space. If I had to take you out of maybe the more philosophical and into the concrete, we have a couple of different certifications, some of which your listeners may be familiar with. The first one that we got was what's known as a CDFI, right, a certification from the U.S. Treasury as a community development financial institution. And that real quickly is you have in your bylaws or board resolutions, your mission is of economic and community development, but then you have to walk that talk, meaning 60% of your services, primarily your loans, have to be to low to moderate income census tracts and individuals. And so you got to walk that talk every year in terms of certification. Outside of that, our next certification is really as a certified B Corp. And that's a little bit more broad and a little more holistic. So think of, instead of a double bottom line of do well, do good, it's a triple bottom line of, hey, we're going to look out for the social as well as environmental and financial aspects of our customers and the bank. And the B Corp certification probably fits us the most in terms of where the bank's focus and mission really lies. Also has to do with governance and transparency, how we engage with not only our customers, but broader stakeholder groups. And so it's in that realm that Sunrise lives. And if I had to take you one step further, we're also members of what's known as the Global Alliance of Banking on Values. So just think of it as values-based banks, but on every continent of the world, and really allows us to see different models and participate in conversations with banks and cooperatives or credit unions in the U.S. that have this values-based lens, and we can really take a look at, organizations in South America that grew out of the microfinance, or, what's happening in the Bank of Afghanistan or Palestine, some places we rarely hear about. Mm-hmm. These different models are really fascinating, and what's happening in war-torn areas as well as very impoverished areas and very environmentally diminished areas as well. And so, first of all, it takes my complaining away as a banker out because, this is not Afghanistan. And so I should stop complaining and just get on with my work. And so things of that nature make it easy. But it allows the creativity to think outside the box of just your typical bank model.
That makes sense. Okay, so you've got a customer base that is, somewhat serving under like lower and lower middle income, I guess you would say. So maybe you could talk what is the core customer base you mentioned the Hmong. What is the core? Yeah. Is that still a big part of what you do? I mean, who are your core customers today?
Yeah, so there's really two distinct groups of our customers, which really mirror our two business models. One being very traditional, what you might think of traditional community bank, or in our case, traditional community development bank. So urban core, Minneapolis and St. Paul. We are primarily a commercial bank when it comes to lending. So small business loans to create job creation and to support local entrepreneurs. We do a lot of affordable housing lending for shelter, and we do a lot of community facilities as well, and bank a lot of NGOs or nonprofits. And there's a mission fit with all those folks. Mm-hmm. On a consumer side in the Twin Cities, again, from a local perspective, we bank not only the business owners, but we bank primarily 3 different ethnic groups. So the Hmong, as I talked about, the Somali population, and in Minnesota, the Latino population is really Mexican, and so it's a Mexican population. And so that is half of our business, if you will, from a business model. The other half is really in the payments and in the fintech space, and we look for, I guess you call them program managers in the payment side, particularly in the prepaid card space, or fintechs, really technology companies in all aspects, that are looking to serve people and provide some element of good. And they don't necessarily just have to be low income. If you think about good in terms of helping people build their credit history, stay out of high cost or payday lending, build their savings, get access to accounts that they otherwise wouldn't have access to, with unique ways of identifying their citizenship and so forth. So we use our partnerships with fintechs and payment providers in order to provide greater access, convenience, ease of use through better design and at a fair price.
Okay, so then when did that whole fintech, that initiative, I guess you'd call it, or the fintech part of the bank, when did that all get going, and what was the sort of the spark that that kind of created that? Because you've got, on the one hand, they feel like 2 very different initiatives. You've got you're serving your core customers, and then you're also becoming like a banking as a service type to other fintech companies. And when and why did you get that started?
Yeah, it's funny because I can picture it like it was yesterday. So in the bank that my father and I bought, I was walking across the parking lot, and I saw 3 older Hmong women. I'll call them grandmothers because that's the persona in my head. They were trying to use their EBT card, their electronic benefits card, their food stamps, if you will.
Right.
They're trying to get the money off the card at our ATM, and they were putting it in and pushing buttons, and it wasn't working out. So I went up and helped them. They didn't speak English, and I don't speak Hmong, and so there were a lot of smiles, and I showed them how to use it, and we went through all 3 cards, and they got their money. And that, if there was a moment of the light bulb going on, it was at that time that I was like, a little bit of education with technology really can allow us to help a lot of people get access to their money. Mm-hmm. And it's not all that complicated. What ended up happening from there is those 3 grandmothers, they contacted us through one of their children and asked if we could hold classes at the ATM to show everybody how to use their EBT card. And so we did. We showed everybody in the community how to use their EBT card. And truth be told, we used to load that ATM up with like $80,000 every 2 weeks, and it would be gone. But it was a great way of building trust with the community and engaging with them, and then ultimately getting more staff. And so it really was, again, exponential or a multiplier in terms of engagement and business for the bank. But it really started with trying to listen to what the needs are and figuring out, how to help people with their electronic benefits card.
Right. Okay, but obviously you've moved a long way, a lot further along the way than that. And maybe you can tell us. I see your name more and more. There's obviously there's True Connect, Remitly. I've seen Self Lender. Actually, they're just called Self these days. But So maybe you can tell us. Let me take one or two of those and just talk about what you're actually providing and how the relationship sort of started.
Yeah. So I'd probably take you from that story and just refer back to one of the comments that I said, that I'm probably more of an entrepreneur than a banker. Mm-hmm. So it really started to stem when we were working with immigrant populations and so forth. We were testing and trying everything we could to innovate, to provide greater access to accounts and to loans to individuals and businesses. It was that same mindset coming off of working in that prepaid space where we started, to what else can we do? And we've been in the tax business, we were in the check cashing business. We've been in multiple different businesses that has led us up to where we are today, to some of the products like, for example, TrueConnect. And so TrueConnect is a small dollar loan offering. It's a volunteer employee benefit, so we sell it to businesses for the benefit of their employees, and it allows them to take out a loan anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000, gets repaid through payroll deduction. It is a fixed rate, no cost, no fees, if you will, and can be prepaid at any time. And so we're engaging with employers to help the financial wellness of their employees.
Right. Okay. So I know, I mean, obviously, that kind of service is, it can be very, very, very helpful for those that are struggling. But I guess the question, I read that you're not only a partner with TrueConnect, that you actually made an investment in that company. Can you tell us? So this is something that, is that something you plan on doing more of? I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. TrueConnect is unique in that case, and it's more like a joint venture in that case than it is just a regular partnership.
Right.
Yeah, because in that case, we did make an investment in the company, and we can just see what is coming in its benefits, and not just from the standpoint of a one product situation. TrueConnect, while we talk about it in terms of a small dollar installment loan, it really is a platform in which to deliver additional products and services to employees. And whether that's payroll deducted in terms of a loan, whether that's access to accounts or remittances, savings products, I think there's all sorts of ways in which we can help, generally speaking, that middle to low end of employees, and even high end, I should say, access TrueConnect loans as well. But there are products and services that we can distribute through that channel, probably very accessibly, super conveniently, because we have some data. And if designed right, they can be very simple to use and really at an efficient price for everyone. And so the fact is that that's a really good model and a platform, and hence why we made the investment.
Right. Okay.
Now, I wish I had the capital to do multiple investments.
Right.
And we may, in some cases, trade some banking services for a stake in the company to help maybe more of a startup get out and running. But there's limits to what we can do from a financial capital standpoint.
Sure, understood. And maybe just talk about Self. I mean, we had James Garvey, the CEO, on the show a bit over a year ago, and it's another fascinating company, that a creative idea to help consumers, build or rebuild their credit. Tell us about how you kind of connected with James and how the partnership works.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was funny because we got connected with James through multiple channels. One that sticks out, I think the first time I ever met him was at what used to be CFSI, now the Financial Health Network.
Yep.
Is where he and I first met. But we had multiple people saying, David, you need to meet James. And I think he had a few people say, James, you need to meet David in Sunrise, in terms of you seem there's a fit there. And so that was kind of the initial discussion. And I would say pretty much right from the start, there was very much a willingness on both sides to want to do business together and create that contractual and partnership relationship in which to provide, on our side, the banking service of leveraging the charter and kind of managing the flow of funds, and for James to have that capability in order to distribute his loans in all 50 states.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so then how should we think of Sunrise, or how would you like lots of fintech people, entrepreneurs listen to this show? How would you like them to think of you? How should they? You're doing banking as a service. I mean, what are the
Yep. offerings
that you would like to highlight as far as how you want to work with other fintechs?
Yeah, so I think banking as a service is probably the most generic way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
What we'd really love to do is to engage in conversation, and we do this really on a daily basis with fintechs, not only in the U.S. but also in the U.K. and EU primarily, and those fintechs wanting to come to the United States. The conversation is one of what are your capabilities and goals and aspirations, and what are ours. And the fact is it's funny, even some conversations where you think there might not be something, or what we run into a lot is people that don't think that their fintech does good in some way, but the fact is it really does. It's like, like an earn-up I wrote about they're helping people with their budgeting and their bills, and that is such a financial wellness component that we would love to see expanded. Or Nova Credit. Now, we don't work with these two yet, but the fact is, if with the ethnic populations that we serve and the immigrant populations, like a Nova Credit that can, kind of import the credit history from their home or host country to the U.S. credit system, really provides people access to, credit and accounts and so much more, and gets, a lot of times their entrepreneurial launch. And so there are tremendous amounts of fintechs, in my opinion, that do good, that may not think of it in that way, but there are synergies between us. And even if it's the case that we can't help them, we might be able to refer them either to another bank or to investors and so forth that can. And so our doors are open to have those conversations with financial technology companies pretty much anywhere and explore the possibilities.
Right. So, and just to be clear then, I mean, the last time we chatted was actually in Paris at the Paris Fintech Forum. And you're going there because you want to meet with other European fintechs, but it's only for them who are only those fintechs interested in entering the US market, right?
Yeah, we have a U.S. banking license and charter, and so this is the place that we do business. Now, we do have, for example, prepaid programs through some program managers, probably in 8 to 10 different countries that we distribute cards, but it's out of a U.S. domiciled entity. And so it is primarily the U.S. in terms of the distribution, but I would say our market is probably North America, UK, and EU in terms of companies that want to domicile here and do business and get access to the market. And when you talked about an offering, this sounds fairly generic, but if you have to move, store, or lend money, that's what we're in the business for. And whether there's a mission and a values fit, that's the conversation that we need to have.
Right. Got it. Okay. So I'm curious about your use of technology. I mean, you're here, you've already contrasted sort of the helping the immigrant community that were really, technology challenged, shall we say, going to providing technology services and banking services. How are you using technology internally to serve your customers?
Sure. Internally, like a lot of community banks, we're transforming, our paper offerings, if you will, to digital from a distribution standpoint. And we actually do something a lot of times we had ideas locally that we expanded nationally in terms of products and services. In terms of the fintech, this is one that's kind of been the reverse. So we've digitized our standard checking, savings, and loan products. And now we're partnering with local partners in the Twin Cities and somewhat just outside the Twin Cities in order to distribute those products. So if you go to, one example is a nonprofit called Prepare and Prosper. And we have what's called the FAIR initiative. And Prepare and Prosper, really, their main business is doing volunteer income tax preparation. But at that time of tax preparation, there's usually a refund, there's a need for a checking or a savings account, and there's an opportunity in which to teach people how to use those tools. And so Prepare and Prosper, through their distribution of tax prep sites and their people, they can offer a white labeled product, the FAIR checking or savings account, right at the point of desktop. And so this is one way that we can reach our tentacles out, not just within our local community, but even broader, I think, as time goes on. And so it's the partnership and collaboration type of model over again.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, from that technology standpoint, I think the other thing that you see is our systems today continue to transform, and they transform not only within what you might think of the core technology of the bank. It's our data warehouse and our data systems that become extremely important in terms of fintech. And so not only fintech, but both locally, we really are finding ourselves in the data business. And so our ability to house data, store data, access it becomes very important. And those are kind of things that they're in the back room behind the curtains, but that's where some of the magic happens. Right.
Okay. So then maybe can you give the listeners some sense of the size of your bank, like assets, number of branches, employees, that sort of thing?
You got it. So we are $1.1 billion in total assets, is what you would see on our call report or on any financial statement. We generate so many deposits through our payments and fintechs that we're really about $1.5 billion if you take into account the amount of deposits we sell off our balance sheet. So all things considered, we're relatively, from a community bank size, we're a good sustainable size and growing. We're not super small, but we're not super big, which is good because we're still agile enough. We have about 270 employees, and our headquarters is in St. Paul, Minnesota. We have 6 banking locations or branches in both Minneapolis and St. Paul. And then we also have a production office in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And if you're not familiar with Sioux Falls, it is the card capital of the world, whether it's prepaid cards or credit cards. And it's a lot of where the payments industry lives in the U.S., somewhat because of the laws of South Dakota, the state of South Dakota, is where it kind of grew out of in the Citibank and Chase and Target, and you'll find all the credit card companies domiciled there. So the talent is there in terms of the payments business, as well as attorneys and accountants and so forth. So our office in Sioux Falls houses about 20 plus employees and is growing significantly. And so that's a lot of where the fintech business comes. But I would say that one of the secret sauces, if you will, to Sunrise in terms of its core competency will be in the area of compliance. Our compliance department is probably more like a U.S. bank than it is a community bank. And it's the capabilities that we have in that department that really allow us to be entrepreneurial, try different business lines, look at all sorts of different models on the fintech side, whether it is to store, move, or lend money. Everybody's got a little different or secret sauce in terms of what they present. And our job is to keep that compliant, yet allowing people to do business. And so we've been able to figure out many creative ways in which to work within the regulations and do it safely and soundly, but allow business to continue.
Right. Okay. I'm curious about, you wrote a book recently, or I guess it was over a year ago now, but not many bankers write books about fintech. And I know, I haven't read the whole book. I meant to read the whole book before our interview, but I never got around to finishing it. But you have like 5. You feature 5 different companies in there, and some of them we've already talked about.
Yep.
So what was the thinking behind the book, and what were you hoping to achieve?
Yeah. So first, I have to tell you that for the listeners, it's an entrepreneur's book, so it's more of a pamphlet. No, I'm just kidding. It's more of a small book than it is War and Peace.
Right.
And so I don't have the attention span for a large book. The real purpose of it is particularly listening to bankers on one side thinking that, fintech is the end-all, be-all of competitor to community banks and banking. And at the same time, there are other people saying, fintech is it's going to destroy the local and the relationship and all that. And in the conversations that we have with different fintechs, I find more times than not that there's some good that's coming out of it, whether, that's something on the social side or an environmental side or helping seniors or protecting them from elder abuse. There's so many different ways that we see fintechs that are solving problems and helping consumers and businesses that I really wanted to share the stories and let people be aware that, stop fearing this for a moment. Open up your mind as well as your heart for a moment and take a look at what can be done, and are there ways to partner and collaborate to solve issues that you have in your community and to develop that mindset and really start from a standpoint of, is there a way within the fintech industry, broad as it may be, to say, is there some element of good, especially when I look at, the OCC came out and now it's run into a bit of controversy relative to a fintech charter, but financial inclusion was one of the aspects in that. And so is there a way to meet that test? And so I just think people were missing some of the points, or there were dots to connect to say, between your bank, the regulator, and the fintech, there's actually, everybody is in vigorous agreement here, although they're just not communicating. So part of the book was to put out some examples, like on Self we talked about, Peanut Butter that helps people with student loans, True Connect on the small dollar lending, Nova Credit in terms of immigrants and their credit bureaus, and EarnUps in terms of our budget and management. Those were just, I think, 5 examples of like 20 I had in which to just highlight some good that's going on in the industry and try to encourage people to think in that mindset, particularly fintechs, that this is there's good in this. There's more than just money that can be had here.
Right. Okay, so we're almost out of time, but a couple more questions I really want to get to here. First is just about the community banking landscape in general. I feel like community banks are continuing to be challenged by technology and by fintech. You're obviously one that has kind of really used sort of technology to your advantage. But what are your thoughts on the community banking sector as a whole? Are you optimistic about its future?
I wish I could say that I'm optimistic about its future, but I think we've seen the number of bank charters decline over the past 30 years for multiple reasons, and that continues today. We lose about one bank charter a day due to merger consolidation and so forth. Mm-hmm. And that is going to continue, if not accelerate, with the entrance of fintech in this space. And so it's going to take a bank that is open-minded, willing to collaborate, in which to engage with fintech and invest in it, in which to survive to a certain extent. It's not to say that all community banks are going away, because some are in very rural parts or have very niche businesses, and they will continue, but you're just not going to have as many charters as we do today. It's just the game is moving at such a pace, and if you hadn't made that investment, it's almost hard to catch up at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
If I can say one other thing in regards to that, one of the biggest issues is not financial. It's really the mindset of both the board and management of community banks. The diversity of thought, or the scarcity mind of saying, hey, can we just go back the way it was?
Right.
And that's like, Blockbuster thinking it's going to resurrect and Netflix is going to go away. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, we're recording this on March 11th, the day that the WHO just declared COVID-19 a pandemic. And I'm curious, obviously it's a fast-moving situation. This will be published in a couple of weeks, and things might have changed completely by then. But I'm just curious to get your take on how you feel like it's impacting, or it will impact, the banking system and banks like yours, and maybe what fintech can do to help.
Yeah, it's a great question, Peter. This has been my life for the past several days, and I think will continue to be so for the next couple of months. So if you think about a bank from our two business models, let's take our very local business model approach. As this pandemic kind of spreads its way through the United States, you'll find that branches close or consolidate to have only one branch open in a particular area to minimize the impact. Lobbies being closed, using drive-through, relying on their technology, their online banking, their mobile banking, in which to transact business. And so this is really, if there is a silver lining in terms of banks and technology, I think the pandemic is going to shift banks' mindset into, can we work remotely? Why do we do things the way we do? What's really essential? When you get down to those root questions of, these are the things we really need to do, and these are things that were nice, but boy, we could stop doing them, that's when change happens. And unfortunately, it takes a crisis to do that. But the fact is the preparation for that and the mindset around that is really coming from a good place of, we want to protect our customers, our employees, and our community from the spreading of this pandemic, but it really is allowing us to rethink what is essential and how are we going to function under those conditions, which a lot of will rely on our ability to remote in from home and use automation processes and so forth.
Right.
If I had to take that out into the broader fintech space, it is one of the beauties of an automated technology, and that is, I never went into a bank to start with. I don't even rely on that system today. I can transact, I can access my loan with various tools, whether it's a card or online, and do so very efficiently and effectively, and without having to leave the comfort of my home or expose myself or my family to that.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so last question then. So what is on tap? What's next for Sunrise Banks?
Yeah, for Sunrise, it's really going to be the big growth engine for us will be around our engagement with financial technology companies in broadening our capabilities and capacity in which to do that. And we'll likely spin up an entity in which we'll be able to take on more volume in terms of fintechs and work with many banks in which to distribute some of those loans and assets and potentially kind of share in that growth. And so we see from our own pipeline standpoint, as well as what's beyond that fintech is a big and bright future for us. And we look to engage with fintechs on all sorts of different levels. And the one thing that I would kind of lay out where we really find some interesting models is on companies and individuals who have technologies or customer bases that they don't think they're a fintech. They don't identify that way. They might identify that they're an attorney or an accountant or something, but they have a solution in which they do need to move, store, or lend money, in which we can help them do that and facilitate that. And so we're seeing more and more our services is behind the curtain, or we're on the back of the card, we're embedded in the terms and conditions, but our customer partners on the front, and we're just facilitating a better, faster, easier transaction for the consumer or business that's on front, a better customer experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds great. And I wish you all the best. I really appreciate you coming on the show today, David.
Thanks, Peter. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay, see ya.
Bye-bye.
You know, we've heard it many times from banks of all sizes that say they're not really a bank, they're more of a fintech company or even a technology company, as some of them say. And, you know, I think in the case of Sunrise Banks, they are walking the walk. And, you know, I think they're doing what makes them so interesting to me is that they're really embracing fintech, embracing being a provider to other fintech companies, while at the same time they're this mission-driven company serving their community, serving either a CDFI and a B Corp. And that combination, I think, is unique in the entire country. I really don't think there is another bank out there quite like Sunrise Banks. So I think they have a unique position, and David is, obviously has big plans, and I think they're one of the most interesting banks and one to watch. Anyway, on that note, I will sign off. I very much appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.